every review I watched, this film has been billed as a melodrama. So I give you not a melodrama, because in the film they don't die. If one of them died, it was a melodrama. Yeah, exactly. So, Douglas Sirk wanted to kill off the Ron character. Possibly because it would be really cool to see a nice romantic dying scene with Rock Hudson. But somebody convinced him not to do it. And so they both live. They live happily after. That is not a melodrama. So I would say An Affair to Remember is much more melodramatic because, you know, she's at the end. We don't know if she can walk again. Blah, 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 blah. That you could say is melodrama. But even that, I would say, is a romantic drama because it does have the beats of the romance genre. And they do end up together. It would be nice if she could walk, but sorry if I spoiled the ending of that. We don't know. Just saying, because that is a romantic and slow progression of plot, etc., and everything is difficult, doesn't mean that it is a melodrama. In my opinion, this film has the romantic plot points of a basic romance story as we know it now in the 2020s. I would even postulate that this film is one of the movies that made clear why we wanted romantic plot points, specifically those beats in a romance story. And I would also postulate that most people who write romance stories will have seen this film. And you can either decide to do the same thing or you can do something else, but it is certainly influential. It has also been called the most influential film by Douglas Sirk and by Rock Hudson for their separate bodies of work. So that's important. So it's a cozy, slow-moving film, but it has a certain amount of pace to it that is particularly useful for itself. There's nowhere where you say, oh, this is slowing down or it's speeding up. It is, you know, when he falls off the cliff, that is an action shot. But the story doesn't, the whole film doesn't actually speed up or anything at that point. It doesn't become like an action scene with an action movie and a...
Splat!
He does go plop into the snow. And then dusk falls and I'm like, oh no, if they leave him there, then that's going to be far worse than he fell down a mountain. He's going to be dead because of... hypothermal, you know, undercooling.
Hypothermia.
That one. So it was actually much more dangerous than it turned out to be, because he's probably only going to be recovering from the actual fall, not from being left there by himself in overnight, possibly in the snow in the mountains. Some of the romantic plot points that we tend to see when it's pure romance genre are, for instance, the hook, which could be the meet cute, and
The what?
the meet cute. Oh, okay. So the meet cute.
It sounded really different when you said it that very fast.
You spell it with 2 E's.
No, I get it.
Yes, the meet cute, and we have, of course, the meet cute is she's seen him before. But he is now in the garden and she needs to deal with him because she says her late husband always dealt with the garden. And they call it landscaping, so it's a rather extensive garden. It's also upper middle class. And that's a point that I find in this film, is that it gets belabored quite a bit by the way everybody is. Then you have the call to adventure or the start of the relationship. Then you have the inciting incident. Then you have the rejection of the relationship. And then, of course, everything is even more difficult. And there's the choice. Do you go for it? Do you not go for it? And I can't quite find just right now what that one is called. But then you have the resolution where they come together after all the things they've been through. Well, Ron falling off that cliff, and she's
Splat.
splat. I mean, it's literally all these points are in there. You have the meet cute in the garden where Ron is working, but she hasn't really noticed him before because her late husband always took care of all the arranging for the garden work, which makes no sense because she's the stay-at-home mom. But hey, it might because of what I'm going to say later on in this thing. So I'll put a pin in that. And then there's they come together. The meet cute is just them having tea in the garden, and you just go, oh, these are people who like to just have tea together. That's a completely different set of people than what she's working with, namely her friend who is constantly asking her to go to the country club with her, and she says, I'm not a country club person. And she has never been, so she's already made those decisions in the last 20 years of her life. No, I'm not going to bother with the country club. But now her kids are out of the house and her husband is dead. They, by the way, don't say how long he's been dead, but not that long because she is only now realizing that she's not the one taking care of the garden and she kind of needs to get the trees sorted. So I would say the inciting incident is that he then asks her to come to this is not immediately, but after a while he asks her to come to see his tree growing business. Because he's a tree grower, his father was the one who had the landscaping business. And he says he's going to want to stop that and fully commit to the tree growing business. I'm thinking, she's upper middle class and he is not lower class, because this could be billed as this is a class difference, and it is. The whole town is upset over the class difference between them because he cuts people's trees in that town. There's nothing outside this town. Obviously, the whole world consists of this town. For these people anyway. And then that's one thing. The other thing, he's younger than her. We will talk about that. But he is not lower class, and I will tell you why. Because his father owned the business, he worked in the business, and he was doing hands-on the work. So he was in people's gardens. You can say, right, okay, that's maybe upper lower class and business owner. But Ron himself is actually owning a business of a piece of land up on a mountain where he grows trees, and he sells these trees to other businesses. Now you're no longer, this is not a lower class situation by any stretch of the imagination. So he is a business owner. He is not the white collar worker that sits in an office, makes out people's wills or whatnot, and then goes home with people living in this upper middle class town. So within the middle class, there's a huge difference. And they're upset that he is the wrong type of middle class. They're also upset that he's pretty. And they're upset that that he's younger than her. The very opening scene of the film is her friend Sarah comes and it's such a clever movie. Because in the few sentences, now not so few sentences, but in the short conversation that Sarah has with Cary, our lead here, is establishing how old everybody is, that the world consists of men dating women much younger than themselves. She even mentions 18-year-old, like a middle-aged guy with an 18-year-old girl. That is mentioned, and oh, isn't the world just unjust? And oh, by the way, here's the stuff for the meeting. It's like, it's the fabric of their world. And I think Douglas Sirk, who was of course German, was making films in America, but he was like, what are these people doing? Why they're making a class distinction between this guy that is somewhat younger and themselves, whereas practically no distinction here. They're all well off, they're all doing well, and it's just small town America. What's your problem? Oh, so it must be the fact that he's younger. Let's set this up. We will accept in the fabric or the walls of this story that an older guy goes with a very young woman, which is, I think, the whole world round is how these things are said. That's fine, that's okay. But a 38-year-old woman who has raised 2 children already and is widowed, going with a 30-year-old man, ooh. And why is he 30 years old? Well, he can, at the very youngest, he cannot be any younger than 28. He has taken over the business from his father for the last 3 years. Before that, we know that he went to Korea. So that would have been 1 to 2 years. So that puts it back in 1950. If he's 28 now, then he would be 23. He still needs to go for a couple of years, several years, to agricultural school, which is of advanced education. So, yeah, we're gonna have to have him at 28 or 30 years old, assuming that he didn't work in the business for a while yet before his father died, because he says his dad died 3 years ago and he took over the business, which may have been the reason that he had to come back from Korea, because he would have been the only one. There's a business and there's nobody there. There's no mother, there's no sisters, there's nobody. So that would maybe not be a reason then for him to come back if his father dies. I don't know, but it was certain that he can't be much younger with all of that. So, yeah, so she's 8 years older. What do you want? How do we know that she's 38? Well, apart from the actress being 38, she was married when she was 17. She likely had a baby at 18 and another baby at 20 or 19. And unfortunately stopped having babies because that would have been the Great Depression. Because her eldest is now, let's call it, 22 years old. He's still in university, so he's not much older than that. That's the maximum age that he could have. And her youngest is already working as a social worker. So she also would have had some advanced education, maybe 2-3 years of college, and then started working. She has to be at least 20. Yeah. So that's how I come to 38 to 40 years old for Cary. What's Cary's biggest problem? It's not really friends. It's not really anything. It's not even that she's widowed. Her biggest problem, in my opinion, is the patriarchy.
Down with the patriarchy!
So yeah, I will drag the patriarchy into this, because from the very beginning, through the whole of the middle, to the entirety of the end, everybody is telling Cary what to do. They're lecturing her. They're telling her how things should be. They're telling her what their opinion of her life is, what her choices how they will be affected by how her choices would ruin everybody's lives, and how life would be much better. Her life would be much better if she did what they tell her to. Everybody. Oh, surely not her love interest. Yes, him too. Surely not the kindly doctor that speaks to her kindly and tells her that she really should go back to him after she's rejected him because she had actual reasons and stuff. And then he doesn't do that. He does it with a kind voice. Everybody does everything with a very kind voice. Except for Mona, who is at least outright hostile and horrible. And
Whoopee!
at least you know where you're at with Mona. You can just say, right, I'm not going anywhere near that woman. Cary literally says that at some point. I don't want to go there because Mona's going to be there. We all know people like this in our lives. Everybody had a Mona.
I don't want a Mona.
We never want Mona. Monas have to go away. But at least you know where you're at with a Mona. You know, she can't hide the horrible thoughts in her brain, and she will always make it come out so that you know she despises you. But I think everybody in this film is against Carrie starting an actual life for herself. She's done everything that the whole society wanted her to do, and there she is at 38. House is empty, husband died, who knows? Husband might have been also a somewhat older man who decided at 38 or whatever to start his family life, and here's a nice pretty 17-year-old, let's have her. I don't know, they never talk about who it was. However, Harvey, the love interest that everybody would like her to have, because he's like a respectable guy from the country club who is friends with everybody and who was going to only want from her that they just sit there for the rest of their lives and go along and go to the country club, I suppose. But that guy is ancient. I mean, he's easily 65. If that guy is not near retirement or retired, I don't know what. And she's 38 or 40. Let's call it 40.
Oh yeah, then he's doing badly. He should be looking for an 18-year-old.
Yeah. Well, for him, it's a 38-year-old or 40-year-old.
Settling.
Yeah, I mean, it's she's still 25 years younger than he is. And, here's a clue that her husband might have been as well, because he was the best friend of her husband.
Oh, God.
So that, I would say her husband was indeed 25 years her senior, and she's already done the settled down thing. She's done everything. Now, this movie has been called a white picket fence movie. I've not really found many others in the genre. But
the genre of one.
Yeah, but it does actually start with a good view of the white picket fence around her house or around her garden. And it's very low, and it's a small white picket fence, but you can't jump over it. So it's the boxing in. And Douglas Sirk has been noted to use this as the visuals. So in the cinematography, you have her with all these nondescript walls. There's not a lot of ornate stuff on the walls. There's beautiful furniture and stuff. But when it's like being filmed, and then you always see this like a kind of blank but colored wall. So some kind of like bland green or whatever. Nondescript stuff going on, and then there's all these walls, and then there are lots of reflections, which it starts with a reflection of her in the mirror where she's sitting up to actually receive her kids, because that's all she does is wait for her kids to come home. And at some point in the movie they don't come home, see? But she waits for the kids to come home, and she puts on something nice, and she looks stunning, she looks awesome, she's fantastic. And by the time she puts on the red dress, she is like amazing. And the reactions of the people is, oh, of course you should be wearing that amazing red dress. Yes, you should. No, they're very nervous. They don't like it. And the only one who says it outright to her is her son, because it's like, whoa, hello. And the daughter calls it out and calls it an Oedipus complex. Which, I mean, if she had kids at 18, sorry, she is not going to be an old biddy. And these kids, so we've got the time that Cary married in, which is the Great Depression, 1932, 33, 34, something like that. So they were setting up for a different life. They probably had to struggle. It's a middle class. It's not the upper class, so there's no inherited money or anything like that. They probably made this life by themselves, or with with the help of a good education. But by the time you get to the 50s, we're totally out of that whole mindset of Great Depression, war. Now, 1955, nobody's looking at any sort of like historical viewpoint of your life. Is like, it's not, this movie is totally not about any of the things I just said in the last 2 minutes. It's skimming over that. But the reasons that the daughter and the son aren't already married, having kids, and the daughter does come home saying, "Oh, look at my ring, I'm gonna get married." Cary says, "Aren't you a bit too young?" And like I said, the daughter must be about 20 because she's already working. So no, she's not that young, really. But in 1955, they're starting to think, wait, shouldn't you just take it slower? You don't have to immediately bog yourself down with kids, because marriage did mean kids in 1955. You have to really get to the early 60s before you have the pill. And a condom is only so reliable as the guy using it, right? So if the guy wants her to have a kid, he only has to mess it up once a year. So there aren't really any kids, grandchildren in the future. There's no expectation of her to help with them. The kids don't live in that town. They live in the city. They come home by the train every weekend or every other weekend, and sometimes they just don't come anymore because they start in their own lives. This is a modern era. So 1950s. I did a review of another film that was from 1959, and I'm blanking on the title, but that was exactly about this whole thing of when do you get married as a young person? Why do you get married as a young person? Because you want to live together, or because you actually want to start a family? Do you have to get married? Are there other options? This is the time, the era in which these questions actually come in. And this movie only shows the guy, the boy, is a 20, let's call it 23 or 4-year-old. He's still, or 22 even, he's still in university. He's going to spend a year abroad. He doesn't have a girl. He doesn't need to think about that. And you go, okay, patriarchy. Men have a lot more time. They don't have to be bogged down with home life and baby making constantly. So, but the daughter, as far as Cary is concerned, is no, don't get married right now. But if she does, it's still not going to expect Cary to be the babysitting grandma every, 3 or 4 days a week. They live in a different city. So everything that came before got Cary to this point, and she is a new generation of something that hasn't happened before yet. The young adult, yes, mother, but the kids have flown the nest. And she's young. So if you fast forward another 10 years, or especially 20 years, back all the way to the 70s, these mothers would, after that, go to university themselves. Go have an education. Start working. They've got 20, 30 years to go. 30 years. Before they even need to think about retirement. They could have a whole career. So it has been the patriarchy that has dictated Cary's life to this point, and she's very malleable. She will say yes, she will go along with everything that everybody expects. And then here is Rock Hudson.
The Rock!
Rock Hudson. And this is why this role needs to be someone who is irrefutably a stunning male person. Of a certain age, not too old, a little bit on the younger side, and he needs to be absolutely stunning. And he doesn't really need to be anything else than that, because his lines aren't that good. It's all about Cary. She's now presented with, here's this guy, I'm completely available, nobody else needs me, except that they all say they do.
But they don't actually.
But they really don't, no. It's just power, it's all a power struggle. And then she goes along and she takes up this relationship because Ron, played by Rock Hudson, shows her a world where things are different. He lives in a world of the, I wouldn't say it's the Walden Thoreau thing, although the book is in there and they quote the book, but I have read Walden. And this guy was definitely upper class, and he was slumming it, and he was doing all sorts of stuff. So that nobody can really do what he did. But there's some stuff in there about getting out of the rat race. That is the basics, I think, of Ron's life and his friend Mick. And this is where we find out that Ron can't be that young because Ron went to Korea with Mick, and Mick had already, and they're contemporaries, and Mick was already a vice VP or something, like a VP at a company. And when he came back from Korea, he chucked it all because he'd been talking to Ron for a couple of years in the army. And saying, why are you doing this? Do you want to do the rat race? Do you want, is this the good life? For anyone who's seen The Good Life, these are the people who were doing the good life concepts before you got to the flower power in the 70s and this whole kind of like Chuck society, Chuck the authoritarianism. We're gonna have a different life. These were doing it already. I think they're pre-beatniks or something like that. They're not young enough to be beatniks because they're actually married couples who are having leading proper lives. Proper as in they have homes that they live in. They set up their lives in a different way. And with Ron, it's growing trees. And Mick as well, he's tree seller. And they have this wonderful society of people around them. And there's something about their society that is markedly different, which may have been Douglas Sirk that entered that into the script. I don't know. I hope so. We know somebody did, so we're thankful. Because his society is full of diversity. No, we cannot have black people in this film, clearly. Not that diverse, unfortunately. But we have our Italians and our, the immigrants, the families, the grandpa, and we have all sorts of people coming to that. Ron invites Cary to an evening, and it's just an impromptu, lovely house party at their friend's place. Where she also gets, the script continues to be clever to throw in every line that there is actually has something important to say. So the life that Ron is leading is certainly a lot more fun and pleasant, and there's a Dutch word that doesn't translate called gezellig, which is also known as the Danish word hygge, if I pronounce that correctly. But the English language doesn't seem to have that word, but it's basically them have spontaneous fun in their house with the music and the food, and it's not
sociable.
It's sociable, it's cozy, it is nice people having a nice time. And that's not how her country club life, not that she does the country club, but she keeps getting dragged into the country club by her friend. So I can really understand why she said no originally, but there's not much to replace it with because she doesn't seem to be part of a church or anything. A lot of people lead their social lives via churches. But she doesn't have that either. She just has her friend, Sarah, and that's about it. And that friend is definitely part of the conventions of society as they see it. Now, we think, because Ron showed her some other way of doing life, we think that, they're much freer about it. But it actually comes down to when she says to Ron, let's wait. My kids are upset over our announcement to get married. Let's wait until it blows over. And he says, wait for what? Okay, does he have a point? A little bit. Oh, yeah. Peanut Gallery says here's a point.
Yeah, because you can wait for convention forever and it's never going to change. Yes. That's the point.
And that's why he doesn't want to. He has already made the change to leading an alternative lifestyle, although the pressures on him wouldn't have been as high because he's from the lower middle class and not from the upper middle class and hasn't lived in upper middle class conventions for 20 or possibly all her life. But if he had said, okay, you need some time. That your kids need time, I'm not interested. But you need some time. I'm hearing that you need some time. Let's take some time. That, I think, would have been really, really nice. I think that if I were to write a romance story, I would want my male protagonist to say, what do you need? Is this what you need? Okay, let's see how we can do that. Can we still set a date? Or can we set some preliminary dates as to how much time would you initially need until the next school year is done for your eldest? Or, whatever it is. Because by the time that she's therefore broken off the relationship, because he gives her an ultimatum. She asks for time. And he says, wait for what? And I love the scenes. I'm there for every single scene. But in reality, I would say, no, he is just as steadfast in his way of life needs to be done my way. This is what I've chosen, and therefore you must come into my life and do what I do, as her previous life or her current life is expecting of her as well. So as far as I'm concerned, he's still part of the patriarchy, because he lectures her and he tells her, no, sorry, I'm not going to wait.
Down with the patriarchy!
Down with the patriarchy! But to her credit, she says, well, then I can't marry you. Because he's giving her a situation that she can't do. So what else can she do but go back to what she knows? And where she at least will have her kids. Because if she says yes to him, and then he mistreats her or whatever, not that he would ever do that, because of course he would. But if then the relationship goes awry, and her kids have already, I don't know, left her forever, how would that work? That would never happen. But her society would have said, no, you're out. You were already not part of the country club, and forget coming in as a guest now. Her friend would throw her out. So she walks away from Ron, and that gives her character in my books like. She comes across as demure, and she has been demure her whole life, but she is finding her strength, and that's why watching this movie continues to be fascinating, because you're thinking it's all these scenes and they're just moving along, and oh, here's a plot point, so now they have to react, and then they move along. But it's not. If we watch for the characters, I don't know what else you would watch this movie for, other than it's very pretty. This is clever. This is very clever. So I think maybe Douglas Sirk has put that in, or the writer. So the writer is credited as Peggy Thompson and Edna as the screenplay, but it's after what's called a story by Edna Lee and Harvey Lee, maybe a couple. And when I went to look for it, it turned out it's not a story, because it's a novel. It's a quite thick novel. If I'd known this, I would have read it, but I unfortunately didn't know it, because the movie.
Go read.
The movie says the story by. When there's a credit story by, it's usually somebody came up with the story in the studio and somebody else wrote the screenplay. That's what story by means. So that's their fault that I didn't read the book. Because a thick book, 400 pages, is like, oh, give me all the info. What's happening? What's not in the film?
It is the fault of the patriarchy.
It's the patriarchy. But the screenplay was written by a woman, Peggy Thompson. So I'm very pleased. And Douglas Sirk was known to do all these women's films. So I'm quoting Wikipedia here. It says his work is seen as critique of the bourgeoisie in general and of the 1950s America in particular. Beyond the surface of the film, Sirk worked with complex mise-en-scène and lush technicolor to underline his statements. And his statements would be painting a compassionate portrait of characters trapped by social conditions. And I would definitely say that the social conditions that Cary is living under are so enormous. They are bogging her down from the clothes she's wearing to who she talks to, and everybody is doing it for their own benefit, not for hers. And that's why I think the patriarchy is the only answer to what's happening here. It's just that Douglas Sirk would not have termed it that, because he was living in it. But he was coming from Germany, and he was saying, okay, these people are putting themselves, they're everything is fine for these people. They shouldn't have a horrible life. And theoretically, from the outward perspective, they're having a wonderful life. And that's why that white picket fence genre is called that. Is it looks fine, but you're actually fenced in every turn you take. And I think that was society generally, up until we got some social movements that became countercultural. And 1955 is very early for that, because do you have the beatniks yet? Do we have any of that yet? And probably only came in with youth culture, which didn't happen until literally this point. Which is, even for the kids in this film, the young adults in this film, it's coming too late for them, because this is going to be happening to the teenagers, not to the 20-somethings in 1955. Yes, so Ron has a better life. He created a better life for himself. He decided to go counterculture in as far as he could do it, but he's not allowing her to get away from the patriarchy, because he's implementing patriarchy right where he's at. Isn't that nice?
He is a man too.
He's a man. He's a very pretty man. I mean, is it better to live with Ron? Probably. But
less lonely.
Yeah, she'd have someone, because they will not allow her to have someone other than Harvey in her other life. And let's talk about Harvey. No, let's talk about the other guy. I forgot his name. Yes, I found his name. His name is Howard. So you've got Harvey, was the 65-year-old who wants to court her and would like to sit by the fire with her and go to the country club with her. That's fine. Everybody approves of him. I mean, she can basically box herself in a mausoleum and start becoming a stone statue for from age 40 onwards. Not a problem. Everybody's quite in favor of that. And then there's Howard at the country club, who's been trying to catch her alone and pushes her alone and pushes himself on her and starts kissing her. First gets her alone and then starts kissing her. And when she gets out of those situations, but is it a euphemism for this could have gone a lot worse? This would have gone a lot worse, and this might start going a lot worse the moment that everybody's realizing she's not going to marry Howard and she's going to stay alone. But then she comes in with Ron, and she's invited to show Ron at the country club. Like, whoever thought this was gonna go well? I have no idea. There's like so many reasons why this is not gonna go well, and also it makes no sense for Ron to even say yes to it, because the only reason that Ron would say yes to it in my book, I haven't asked him. You're gonna have to ask him yourself. Is to basically put a stamp on this woman and say, this is the woman on my arm, you all stay away from this woman, I'm going to take her to my social life now. You have now seen what's going to happen. I think that's the only reason, because he's not intending to lead that life. He's never intending to go back there. So there's no reason for him to show his face at all. And yes, it does create a problem, and he immediately, Howard thinks, as stupid men do, is that this woman apparently is slumming it. And if she's slumming it, she's not a lady. And if she's not a lady, he is actually right in sexually harassing her. Because it is sexual harassment. So he tries it. He literally, almost literally says that. But he certainly says something of the sort. And then, of course, Ron is like on his throat. Boom! And they didn't actually push people get up against walls yet, as they do now in in all sorts of dramas. But he pushes him down on a chair and is like, you stay away from my woman.
In modern days, if you ever have a guy do that, kick him in the nuts. And worry about the problems later.
She was never taught to kick the guys in the nuts. Again, patriarchy is dropping a lot of balls here.
Well, you can stamp on them.
And the problem with patriarchy is that they're going to do it to your daughters if you don't mind them doing it to your mother, to your wife, but they will do it to your daughters. So even the men don't get off very well with patriarchy. It is no good for anybody. One thing that patriarchy is good for is that once they get together and, after the first hurdle of I shouldn't, I guess I am because he's dreamy, she stays over at his place. 1955, they never they never actually go up a staircase to go to a bedroom because it's 1955. But there's like them sprawled on the floor in front of the fireplace, which is in every 60s, 70s, etc. movie and television shows. They're always sprawled in front of this fireplace. Because that's the only way you can have them have a romantic, lovey-dovey scene, possibly post-coital.
And not run foul of the house code.
Yes, because the Hays Code says that they can't actually have their clothes off, they can't touch each other while having their clothes off, and they can't be in a bed together. Somebody will have to keep a foot on the floor, as if you couldn't have sex while having one foot on the floor. I don't know what these people are thinking. But, missionary position, of course, they're thinking. But anyway, so don't know what they did, but they certainly did something because she stays overnight. And so that's the only really modern thing in there. Of course, the other modern thing is the couple of times that Cary actually makes decisions for herself. And in the end, she decides to be with Ron because it's a damn sight better than the country club life.
Than Harvey.
Yeah. And so, does she choose actual freedom? No. But she chooses a better life, and she has already seen that her kids are going to drop her because this other thing happens after the whole Christmas stuff, or during Christmas stuff, the lead up to Christmas, where she has rejected Ron because the children would suffer. So, because that's the one thing she couldn't deal with. She actually said, okay, then I'm just not going to do what you want, to a lot of them, to everything except for when her daughter was crying and saying, they're making fun of me and they're saying horrible things about you. They were actually saying horrible things about Cary, because that's what they will do. Everybody insinuates horrible things, and meanwhile they're expecting her to be this prim and proper person.
And not have a life.
Yeah. And so she receives the kids for Christmas. Everybody is happy. Daughter is engaged, and the son says, well, this will be last Christmas in the house because we're going to have to sell it. And I'm going, oh, this 22 or 4-year-old,
whippersnapper.
Yeah, I had a Dutch word in mind, but that's a good one. Whippersnapper is deciding for his mom whether or not she has a house. Excuse me? So that was never in the plan that she was going to keep the house. In fact, her living in that town is super inconvenient to the kids. They probably want her to live probably with the girl once she starts having babies.
With Harvey in his house.
Oh, with Harvey in his... Of course, the boy had already assumed the house was going to be sold anyway because he thought she was going to marry Harvey. Well, there you go. So now his plan is still, the house is going to be sold, Mom. We're going to sell the house. Who sells a house under a person? What? So that tells me this is a true patriarchy because it's not even a question. And the television in the thing, I think that was a big statement by Douglas Sirk. It's a theme throughout the movie. Everybody's telling her to get a television. She refuses. She keeps refusing because she keeps running up a mountain to meet a hot guy. So hey, who has time for television? And in the end, her son actually buys her the television for Christmas. And that's the boxed box where you see her. We've seen her in the beginning with the reflection in the mirror, and now we see her reflection in the television, and you're just going, yeah, who wants this? It was a good commercial, like, against having television in the house. It was also like an absolute in your way object in that living room. She has to keep walking around it, etc. Yeah.
Down with the patriarchy!
Yes, so the conclusion for me is I still love this movie. I have pulled movies apart and told you it's complete bullcrap. I told you what's wrong with the movie. But on the other hand, it's fascinating because it's a look into that life. And their clothing and their hairdo and everything around them is contemporary. But we need to be cautioned because it's known that Douglas Sirk had a particular view of things, so he framed it all in certain ways. He was very cinematographic. He had the mise en scène, etc. His style going on. But he only had choices of what there was. So we can see her hairdo. You will never see somebody playing in a movie that's set in the 50s now have her hairdo, because that's not the hairdo that we consider pretty now. That is not the one that we go, oh, that is representative of that era. Actually, it was representative of the era. We just don't find it pretty. We wouldn't do that to a person now. Whereas she wears it very well. It looks good. But for instance, the hairdo from the friend Sarah, which is also a 40-year-old, and like this slant at the back of the head, a flip, yeah. Is beautiful, and that's more what we know now for the 1950s. But the hairdos were also made to put hats on, and they are wearing the shawls, the scarves that are just, you go outside and you put a scarf over your your head, because you needed something protection from the elements, because it is a New England kind of area. But you can't just squish your hair down because you have a very complicated hairdo. So they run around the film a lot with those scarves, and you will see it all the way up to, I would say, Doris Day films, mid 60s. After that, maybe not so much. The scarves get out of style.
Well, did you like it?
I love this movie. I love this movie. And I found it interesting to like more deeply go into what's actually going on. Because you can just watch this movie surface. You can watch this movie delve into the characters. You can delve into the social commentary, which I now find out that Douglas Sirk actually meant to have social commentary. There is another film that was said to be based directly on this film, and I agree that it is, but I also will say that it is not a remake of this film. So it's Far From Heaven, and it's a 2002 film that was specifically intended to be a commentary on this film and films of the sort. However, changing the gardener into somebody who is black, and changing the husband into 1, alive, hey, and 2, gay, it is such a departure from the actual film as you can't. There's nothing about the Far From Heaven film that you can say is direct commentary on this film or is a remake of this film. They just took the concept and they said, what if? And I find that very interesting. But once I realized it wasn't a remake, I was like, okay, it doesn't need to be, because Douglas Sirk made all sorts of films that had a message, social commentary, and I think they were taking Invitation to Life. That's the film that they are commenting on as well. So it's just several films that Douglas Sirk did, and they poured it into this housewife thing with the gardener. But more than that, it's the moment you say we change these things, that entire film is going to be a different story. Nothing's comparable. So we need to mention Jane Wyman because she's awesome. She won an Academy Award about 6-7 years prior to that. She did Magnificent Obsession with Rock the year before this, and it strengthened her career, and it catapulted Rock Hudson to a movie star. So she was instrumental to that, but she by herself, she is formidable, and because she is able to carry the whole movie. Carrie's face, her face is the face of the movie. To say it's a romance movie, yes, it is a romance drama, but it is also a movie about this woman coming from a boxed-in place and hopefully moving towards a less boxed-in place, but certainly a happier life, and a beginning point or middle point rather than the end point that she was at. They were trying to bury her alive. So I highly recommend it for multiple reasons. Thank you for watching all this time, because I love this movie and I want other people to love this movie. I'm very happy this movie isn't forgotten. Sometimes it's billed at Christmas because there is actually a Christmas area in the film. It's not especially a Christmas movie. It doesn't have like Christmas themes in it, but certainly Christmas is featured in it, and the poor and pitiful Christmas tree actually has a reason why it's a poor and pitiful Christmas tree. And I just will adore it forever and ever, and I can't believe it took me this long to do this film. And I would like to do more, see more of Jane Wyman, and I would like to do a few more Rock Hudson films, because he made some awfully good stuff as well. So until next time, this was my opinion, and I'm sticking to it.